The pandemic is at a peak, and not likely the peak. This week on Poll Hub, with COVID-19 infections, hospitalizations, and deaths surging in every corner of the U.S., is Congress finally ready to act on a new relief bill? We're looking at new polling that asks Americans what they think about the need for a new relief package. And then a different coronavirus question: how long before Americans think life will get back to normal? Well, here's the shocker. A sizable majority of one group says it already has. Really? Well, we're going to dig into that, so let's get to it. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm Jay DeDapper, Director of Innovation here at the Marist Poll.
And I'm Barbara Carvalho, Director of the Marist Poll.
And I'm Miringoff, Director of the Marist College Institute for Public Opinion.
One of the funniest terms in politics, American politics anyway, I think, is lame duck. Either the lame duck president or the lame duck Congress. And what it means is that, the president's on his way out, Donald Trump, and the Congress is on their way out. Some of them will not return because they lost election, they're retiring. And so this lame duck Congress, any lame duck Congress, generally they don't necessarily have a lot of motivation to get stuff done. This time around, there is a lot of motivation to get stuff done. The government's going to run out of money, and there has been a push for a second COVID relief bill now since May. And there seems to be a consensus coming around that maybe, just maybe, they're going to get to it here before they recess in the next really few days. We looked at the polls, before we talk about the politics, we looked at the polls to see what Americans were saying. Because if the thinking is that if there's a big majority of Americans who really, really think this is necessary, maybe that's enough motivation to get Congress to act. So what are the polls saying that Americans are thinking about this?
Well, actually, what we see, Jay, is a pretty significant consensus among Americans. There's been a lot of disruption in terms of the economy, in terms of people's health. Everybody seems to know either someone or has heard of someone who has had COVID, or knows of people who have had COVID. So the recent poll from Pew, 68% of Americans say that the COVID-19 stimulus package is needed as soon as possible by the current Congress. We've seen a lot of people out of work, a lot of industries disrupted. So there is certainly a strong consensus among Americans that this go forward. But this actually isn't a surprise. In September, a Gallup poll showed 70% of Americans said that Congress needed to pass another stimulus bill. So Americans may be in agreement about what needs to be done, but certainly there's been a lot of negotiation, a lot of disagreement in Congress as to what that actually needs to look like.
Yeah, and I think that in this case, the devil is once again in the details. How big a real stimulus package? What does it go for? What kinds of relief will it include? And then you do have the leadership in Congress. We just got through an election, and some people won, some people lost, but Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi are still right where they were, at least for the present. And they don't talk a whole lot. And so the White House is sort of a little bit, the president is AWOL at this point, where he's focused almost entirely on, what he calls is a fraudulent election and all the rights and privileges pertaining thereto. And we have just a very unusual situation that we need some leadership in these waning days to get things moving. And in part, I think, the Congress maybe reacting a little bit to the elections in terms of, it may have been a repudiation of Donald Trump, but it certainly wasn't a repudiation of the Congress. In fact, the Republicans did better than was expected, and right now have the majority in the Senate and picked up seats in the House, which was surprising. So there's no great ground-shaking earthquake coming out of this November election that's going to suddenly make Congress jump into shape here. So I don't know. I'm not overly optimistic. I think there's probably going to be something, but I think it's going to be one of those Washington, Capitol Hill compromises, and I don't know how much is going to get washed out in the details.
Well, what's interesting is I think that Americans actually, there's a lot of positive reaction to the first stimulus package. And there are a lot of Americans that think that a similar stimulus is also required at this point as well. 66% of adults thinks that $900 or more should be sent to each qualifying adult. Again, a stimulus check to Americans, perhaps not at the level that was done in the spring, but one that can, bolster at least some of, the short-term kinds of expenses that families are facing. Also, the unemployment benefits, and there's very strong consensus for that as well as some of our polls have shown, and support for small businesses. Americans are very, very supportive of small businesses. I think that there is just a sense overall that it's very disturbing. Not only are many people or hired and work and employed by small businesses, but we all see that in our downtowns as well, as people struggle with different economic closings and stay-at-home orders. So there's a lot of consensus among Americans. Uh, Unfortunately, also though, there is disagreement in terms of political and party polarization, which we have seen before, but even quite a large proportion of Republicans support a stimulus package going forward.
Seems like one thing that's happened here is that Biden, has won the election, and Lee, as you alluded, the Republicans did not lose ground in Congress, in the House or in the Senate, at least not right now. There's still two races in Georgia that we, have heard something about. But does that seems to have created an opening for this kind of middle of the road caucus, and these have existed throughout a lot of later 20th and early 21st century Congresses, where there are a handful of Republicans, a handful of Democrats, and some label themselves independents, generally in the Senate, but there's also been a caucus in the House that's been this, which are they basically try and represent middle of the road, which in politics nowadays doesn't seem to exist. We seem to exist on the far fringes on either side. But the truth is, when we do look at the polls, and we look at this election in particular, the vast majority of Americans who went to the polls are in the middle of the road someplace. So does this create an opportunity for them to, because they're the ones pushing this latest $900+ billion plan, does this give them kind of a unique opportunity in these few weeks to say, look, the public is here, we're here, you guys get over here, let's do this?
It was funny. I was watching on TV, I guess it was yesterday, the day before, 2 days before. Time flies when you're having so much fun. But there was a press conference of this bipartisan group who are trying to advance a framework. And as only, I had to laugh at the notion because, it's not a huge gathering, but I think anybody in Congress or the Senate who is part of this bipartisan, middle of the road, problem solving, practical, realistic framework was there and had to do their 1 minute. And it was a kind of a crowded stage. They were wearing masks, fortunately, but they kind of like one by one, as congressmen and senators are known to do, to speak about how this is a great solution. I don't know. I mean, does this occur without Mitch McConnell's support, Pelosi's support? Where's the White House, the Treasury? I mean, I just don't know where we're going. And then also, when does the country technically run out of money and they need a spending authorization bill? And there's also the National Defense Authorization Act that the president is threatening to veto. So sometimes I think, Biden's out there. He's come out of the basement. He's now on the first floor. But I don't see any great incentive other than, as Barb, you were talking about, this consensus on the part of the Americans that action needs to be taken, because this is no longer a blue state problem. It's not a red state problem. It's all over the place. And we're having, unfortunately and tragically, just bizarre numbers in terms of people who are, getting COVID, the hospitalization, and then the fatality rate, which is usually follows, has now been picking up in a lot of areas as well. So we're really as the health experts forewarned us, we're really going through that terribly difficult period, which was anticipated. And, you know, we're going to end up probably with some kind of close down again in a lot of parts of the country. And without relief, I mean, we're just looking to fall off the economic cliff there for a lot of families. The financial situation would be indeed very bleak. So I can't say I'm over. I don't want to be Debbie Downer here, but
Well, yeah, I mean, you're sounding,
happy
it's
holidays,
sounding
everybody.
really, really
that,
You
depressingly.
know,
yeah, that
I
horse
mean,
has
it
left the
is.
barn, so to speak.
So are there, I mean, are there consequences? Is there a way that they do come together?
I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know.
that's I think what we don't know. One thing that I would look at though is another factor which we picked up in our index for the month of November, which is the darkening clouds on the economy again. Americans feeling that they were feeling more positive a little bit by little bit as we did the monthly index over the course of the summer and the fall. And this last index turning into November, we pulled in the middle of November. Uh, a significant drop, really, a drop that we spotted and saw. And I just wonder if that added to what's happening with the health numbers is just kind of enough to force the folks in D.C., the politicians, to actually do something.
Were you guys surprised this didn't happen though prior to the election, or did that make sense for them to continue this kind of polarization and be feeding both their bases? Because I mean, it's not like this consensus is among Americans is anything new.
Yeah. I think that Washington was doing its stalemate, dysfunctional wait and see. The question I wanted to ask you guys is, if Donald Trump concedes or had conceded, a couple of days after the election, like normally occurs when you're beaten, um, would that have provided Joe Biden a chance to really step up right now and provide some leadership going into his alleged honeymoon period, which may not exist once he takes the oath of office anyway? But would he be able, right now he's talking about appointments and he's nominating and putting his cabinet together, or at least who he wants. Would he be able to get more into the substance of what a Biden administration would look like if the president wasn't freezing in place a lot of the Trumpies?
Barb, you take that one.
I don't know about that. Yeah, I don't know about that, Lee. I think that's a straw man that we can just, topple. Because I mean, I don't really, I can't think back to a transition period where a president-elect, takes the reins and starts, really managing and directing policy. So this is still, part of the Trump administration. It will be until January 20th. Obviously, the Congress turns over sooner than that. But, I think that's kind of, again, just a false expectation that somehow a president-elect is going to be able to direct policy. He doesn't have the power. He doesn't have the people. Um, there's nothing that would suggest he can certainly get some attention. Trump certainly did during his transition, but the kind of the wheels of government, continue to roll in the direction of the previous administration until January 20th.
Yeah, and he certainly doesn't come away with a mandate that he can start pushing because the other guy hasn't said I'm done. So it becomes.
Well, I don't know how much. Yeah, I just don't know how much that really matters. I know people have made that connection, during 2000 and the problems that we had with um, the catastrophe of 9/11 during that time. But again, I think that has to do with the workings of government, not so much about whether the president is taking a stand. That said, though, there is a lot to be said about how we do get back to a sense of normal for most people. There's a sense among many Americans. In fact, a new Gallup poll points to 62% of Americans do not feel that their lives are back to a pre-COVID state. Again, there's a big party divide. But are you guys surprised by, these statistics that people actually think things are going to get worse, and that people are pretty pessimistic about how soon life will actually get back to normal?
Well, I've already established my pessimistic
That's
position
true.
here, so
But
maybe.
I thought that was about the Congress, which I think we all have a sense of. But this is about the American people, and us getting back on track.
Well, I'll throw my one reaction to that, but I don't have a lot to say on this topic, unlike others. But yes, I knew that was going to draw some reaction. But I think we're at the crossroad of a terrible situation with the pandemic. But we also, over the horizon, we can see the cavalry coming. And they're carrying vaccine, so there's a sense of, if we can just get a little bit more time on the clock through this bleak period, we might start coming out of it. And we're seeing dates about when people might be able to get vaccine. My guess is people are going to feel that things are going to be more likely to return to normal sooner, if in fact they feel that this vaccine does materialize. But that's all I got to say.
So here's why in the beginning of the show, I said kind of the shocker. To me, it is not surprising that 62% of Americans do not feel that we're back to a pre-COVID life. That doesn't surprise me. What does surprise me is that when the question was asked, if you, for instance, are you isolating yourself from people outside, or completely outside your home, or you're doing it completely or mostly? 48% of Democrats say they are. 20% of Republicans say they aren't. 79% of Democrats say that life is not yet back to normal, but 33% say that it's not back to normal if you're Republican. It's not 66% then say, or 67% say that do, but it's a very large majority of Republicans who say that life is back to normal now. And I just find that very difficult to square with the reality of what's happening all over the country, especially in rural areas, which tend to be more Republican, especially in the South, which tend to be more Republican. I just don't
Do you
get
have
it.
some theories?
I don't. I other than the pure partisanship of I am,
I'm fine.
I'm fine, and I'm not going to tell anybody I'm not fine, because that would make me look like a whatever, fill in the blank, whatever side you're on. I'm flabbergasted by
But
it.
here we go. If I'm not wearing a mask, and if I'm not social distancing, and if I'm doing what I normally do and go out to dinner and have, the country is still sort of open right now, and people are interacting, and surprise, surprise, this thing is taking off in terms of the numbers. So I don't have an answer either, but I guess if you're doing what you normally do and they're ignoring this, there's your 25% that makes those numbers real.
Right. So I guess part of what it is that we don't live in a place that's back to normal. End of sentence. I don't care what party you're in. Everybody here wears a mask. We don't eat out in restaurants. I mean, the restaurants aren't even open. Inside dining isn't open. We barely go out. It's now colder, so we don't. People are staying home more. This is not normal, no matter what party you're in. Where we live, which is in the Northeast and in New York, which has a very active governor in terms of the restrictions he's put in.
That's polite.
Right, and so I think that's
Very
what makes it
diplomatic,
difficult.
Jay. Very
Thank you.
diplomatic.
I think that's partly what makes it difficult, because if we could just be dropped into the middle of some place where no one's wearing masks, and you can go to your Chick-fil-A and have your sandwich and sit down and look at everybody around you and not worry about it. Maybe you should be, but not worry about it. Then I guess that's where that comes from, and I think it may just be the isolation that we have here in the Northeast from what some parts of the rest of the country are like. Certainly not California, certainly not
And
Massachusetts
what
or other
about
parts of the
South
Northeast.
Dakota?
Yeah.
South
mean,
Dakota, North Dakota.
North Dakota. I mean, we're all numbers people here. So, I mean, I did see the statistic that 1 out of every 800 North Dakotans has passed away as a result of this. 1 out of every 800. If you do the proportion for what that means in terms of, if it was the same around the entire country, that level, we're talking over 20 million deaths would be occurred. So yeah, we're very different than that. But the other point I wanted to make, forgive me for having more points on this than I even thought I did.
Yeah, I thought
But
you didn't have any opinions about
It's
this, Jay.
encouraging.
we started out, this was a so-called blue state problem, and now it's a red state issue as well. But I've always felt that that's in this case, such a mislabeling, because in a blue state, you have a lot of red voters, and in the red states, you have a lot of blue voters. So folks, one way or another, we're all in on this together, regardless of your partisanship, whether you like that or not.
Well, it was a population density problem because the disease does, transmit itself from person to person. So the closer one is to other people and the number of people, certainly the easier that is to spread. We're 1 week post Thanksgiving. And we're about to go into a pretty heavy holiday season. Um, do you think this sense of the fact that we're seeing numbers surging, um, but we also, on the other hand, see the vaccines around the corner, how are those going to balance out? Do you think we're going to see, the COVID-19 fatigue can kick in and people just say, well, I'm going to celebrate the way I want to celebrate, and they're going to be complacent about preventive measures? Or do you think people are going to kind of hunker down and say, okay, we don't have much farther to go? Um, we can have a quieter holiday season, and actually take that extra step before the vaccines are being.
I think we already saw that at Thanksgiving. Record air travel, 2 days of the highest air travel since pre-pandemic. So I don't. I that would be my guess, Lee.
Yeah, I'm from the hunker down school, but then again, I don't have lots of friends and family, so I don't have this social tension that other
And
people
nobody
think.
wants to see.
Nobody wants to be around me. No, thank you, Barb. No, I think that, I think people are seeing, there's help around the corner, and those who've been ignoring it, no reason to, say, well, here comes the holidays and I should now start, if I can just get past this, everything will be okay. It's going to be a while till the vaccines are available to everybody. It's great that they will be in a while, but in the meantime, I mean, we would all agree that, folks, hang in there. I mean, you've made it this far. Let's, try to bring this back under control a little bit, so that the numbers and these first responders have a prayer. I mean, the hospitals are near capacity, and that's never a good thing. Oh, here I go again. I'm such a. Next week I'll be in a better. I'm in an okay mood.
You've got a week to work on that, Lee. Your attitude is very disappointing.
Yeah,
but
I'm sorry
that'll
about
do
that.
it for this dark and depressing episode of Poll Hub.
Thanks.
Poll Hub is a production of the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York. Mary Griffith is our executive producer. Casey Chapp is our production supervisor. And Amelia Morel, Leo Ruiz, and Madeline Jones are our production assistants. And Marcello Bettman is our lucky editor, once again with a interesting task to stitch this episode together.
I was just thinking of something like, what if he ever took the whole thing and that became the program? We'd really be in big trouble. Anyway,
that would be the blooper reel.
Yeah, that one. Anyway, I would like to extend, as I do at this juncture on every program, our thanks to the Roper Center Archives at Cornell. They provide the opportunity to look back in time. Are there any trends? We're going to have some numbers next week. And we're probably going to have some interesting trends about holiday things and the coronavirus. So let's hold on to that, and we'll be having that just around the corner.
And of course, we love questions and comments. So please reach out to us on social media. We're at Marist Poll on Twitter and Marist Poll on Facebook and Instagram. And our production assistants love to get your comments and figure out the answers to your questions. And finally, if you like what you hear on Poll Hub, please leave us a review on your podcasting app of choice. Positive reviews help others find us. And while you're at it, please go ahead, if you haven't already, and subscribe. So that'll do it for this week. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.